Joe Kennedy.
And I'm Dave Gebro. Welcome to Discograffiti, the music podcast that delivers the objective truth about the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever existed. But before we start tearing the meat off the bone, it's essential that I gotta relay this story to you, Joe.
Yeah, I'm hyped to hear this because you keep telling me that you have a story, but you're not going to tell me what it is.
That's right. It's a secret story. So I was walking down the street the other day in Carson, California.
Where it stinks right now.
It does stink right now. And in fact, let me set the scene. I work as a licensed hearing instrument specialist, and I was wearing a lab coat, walking down the street at a furious pace because I walk 3.2 miles a day while reading Mojo on my phone. So I'm walking down the street in a lab coat, reading Mojo, procuring essential knowledge to be able to do this thing with you, right? This is the lengths to which we go. And I'm walking by a wheelchair I see in the peripheral of my vision. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, a pit bull leaps out, okay, because it was a service dog and it thought that I was walking too close to the wheelchair, and clamps onto my leg, tears through my jeans, and its teeth sink into my leg.
Is that what service dogs are supposed to do?
No. Okay, so the dad...
Because it's a service dog, it mauled me.
I was mauled. So not only that, but the pit bull pushed me into oncoming traffic, okay, into the road. So my first, I'm in shock, okay? I've never been attacked like that. So I look down at my bleeding leg, look up, and I just keep saying, "What the fuck?" over and over again. And then, so my wife designs jeans for a living. These jeans that I was wearing were expensive jeans, but I was given them for free. I'm in shock, and I say, "These jeans cost $200." And then I look at this guy in a wheelchair and his dad, and I'm like, wow, I just completely shit the bed as far as having any credibility right now. So I just said, "Have a nice day," and walked away. And this guy that I passed was like, "Holy shit, dude," because he saw, I mean, it was really intense. It could have gone really bad from there.
At least the dog let go. That was all there was. Sometimes they can really
Yeah, sometimes they could really go to town. I thought that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Plus, it was really close to my weenus. Look.
Oh, you're wearing the jeans.
I'm wearing the jeans.
Yeah, well.
It looks like it was intentionally distressed, but it was a pit bull mauling.
Well, I'm glad the jeans were relatively okay.
Yeah, they're relatively
and your
okay.
weenus is also
That's right. It's in perfect working condition.
Today we are resuming our career overview of the great Pink Floyd.
Yummy!
Specifically, we're moving into the rock dinosaur billionaire years.
So the way that Discograffiti works is we go through an entire output of an artist, the everything, and we research it heavily, and then we assess our objective opinions, and we give it to you.
Those opinions.
Make sure you tune in. Upcoming episodes include Badfinger, Cocteau Twins, Beck, Sly and the Family Stone, Van Halen.
So last time we checked in with Pink Floyd, we had just gotten through the discussing their album Atom Heart Mother, Bad Side A, Great Side B, and now they're kind of at a crossroads. Where do they go next?
The answer is metal. It's all of the band members working together to produce a true work of art. So, we say goodbye to that forever after this record. But if you look at the songwriting credits for the record, it's kind of sad. They wrote everything together. Mm-hmm. And this was a big album for me. In the early 90s, I really took to this album hard. It includes my favorite song by them, Fearless.
Yeah, which should have been a big radio hit, you would think. So they're at a higher level just in general. I think in songwriting, playing, production, arrangement, they are kind of at the full. They're in full flower at this point of their career. They're not really searching for anything.
And it's the last.
It's the
very last unself-conscious Pink Floyd album.
Yeah, right. And it doesn't necessarily need like a theme or anything to hang over it, or even a style. It's just
no, but man, does it hang together. Even Seamus, which is, I mean, admittedly a turd, it doesn't stick out that badly.
Yeah, it hangs together despite they're not really going for some overarching theme or some pretentious, story or something.
And Joe, interestingly, this record was born from complete aimlessness. Echoes came about in a form of a series of experiments called Nothings. And so the original album title was Return of the Son of Nothings.
It's interesting how much better Echoes works, which is kind of a loose composition, a lot of it, right? So there's kind of a lot of atmospherics. It builds into like a really compelling melody and changes and a jam. How that works so much better than Atom Heart Mother, which is all very formal and like part A, part B, part C, and it feels very rigid. Where Echoes feels like it has a looseness and an elasticity to it. Like it feels like they're making it up as they're going along in the best way.
Yeah, it literally always sounds good. I mean, that album just has a vibe to it. Now, I'm going to challenge you on something, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to tell me how this was done. The vocal line of "One of these days I'm going to cut you into little pieces."
I read about this. It's a tape effect, right? So it's a slowed
Correct.
down.
Tell me how it was done, and I'll tell you if you're right or wrong.
They did it with the tape super sped up or something, and then
using what kind of voice?
It was through a vocoder or some kind of synthesizer.
Falsetto voice.
A falsetto. Okay, so
at double speed.
Okay, so
replayed at normal speed.
That's right.
Judges accept that.
I accept that.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I knew it was a thing that they did.
To me, this album is the culmination of all the stumbling around they'd been doing for the previous 3 years. It really is the most well-shaped version of that sort of that tangential drift.
Yeah.
That just feels so good. But now the songwriting was catching up to the production in a perfect marriage. The only thing that isn't amazing about the record is the only shitty Hypnosis album cover they ever produced.
Right. It's okay.
It's fair. I mean, I associate it so closely with the record now, but this is probably my favorite Pink Floyd album, and so it gets a rock solid 5 stars for me.
Yeah, this is an easy 5. I mean, if this isn't a 5, I don't know what's a 5. But also another triumph of metal is the sequencing. It's the songs are sequenced perfectly. Everything kind of creates an atmosphere from the thing that came before.
I mean, the best albums that have ever been made, as far as I'm concerned, are self-contained sound worlds that sound like you could just step into and exist in.
Yeah,
this feels like that.
This is absolutely one of those. It sounds nothing like My Bloody Valentine Loveless, but it takes me to a place the way that record does.
Yeah, there's a lushness to it that's comparable for sure.
And I think there's 3 albums in their career where they were able to do that, and this is one of them. Piper and a later one that we haven't gotten to yet.
So moving on to 1972, the year I and you were born, we have Obscured by Clouds, which is the original soundtrack that Floyd did for La Vallée for Barbet Schroeder again. They were on that guy's jock for some reason. There's some great songs on this. Mostly there's some great song titles, including The Gold, It's in the ... and What's the Deal. These are great song titles. Not as good necessarily as Nick Mason's Fictitious Sports Side 2.
Yeah, that's got all great titles.
All of them.
Yeah. What's the Deal? Okay, great song also. I like that song a lot. That made me think, like, where did the expression "what's the deal" come from? That seems like that's too early. Like 1972, "what's the deal" was already a saying.
There's a lot of sayings that you would think people would know and they don't. You know the saying, "How's tricks"?
That seems old. That seems like
I guess it is. I didn't realize I was old-timey until I had young-timey
that seems like people talk like this here.
Yeah,
hey,
23 Skidoo, cash on the barrelhead.
That I could see. What's the Deal in 1972 doesn't seem right, though.
Right.
It seems like...
most of this album I love. Childhood's End, that sucks. That's Limp Arena Rock. Actually...
There's a few more of those, we're playing in front of the screen, scoring the movie kind of things in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Always skippable.
Well said.
A surprising amount of
That
in
shitty
Pink
song,
Floyd's
by the way, is the last song Pink Floyd released to have lyrics written by Gilmour until a momentary lapse of reason in 1987.
Wow.
Free 4 is that was the single from the record.
Yeah, that's cool. That's like a little like shuffle thing. This record kind of seems like it should be before metal. It seems like it's like
I agree. It's
like,
an outlier.
It seems like
it's a step back.
It's sort of a regression from where they were at in metal.
I kind of feel like they were maybe formulating Dark Side of the Moon, and
Yeah.
then this was something they generated so they could buy time.
And I wonder if some of these, I don't really know the answer to this, but I wonder if some of these are stuff that are songs that kind of didn't make metal, but were still kind of in the mix at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound completely cohesive. Actually, my favorite song on it is the Rick Wright song. I love Stay.
Stay is very good. Yeah,
Stay's
nice ballad.
beautiful. I've always loved it.
Burning Bridges is suitably Floydian.
Yeah. That's a very, again, that
could have
Crosby,
been
Stills,
on, that
Nash
could have
and Young
been on
thing.
Dark Side, I feel like.
Yeah. I think it's a good record. It's not totally essential, but if you're a fan, I mean, there's great stuff on it. I give it 3 stars.
I gave it the same. I also gave it 3 stars.
Then that was it. Then they broke up, and unfortunately, that's all we have to show for them.
Yeah.
And but it still holds up as a body of work. Mm-hmm. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, which is not what happened. What actually happened is,
oh yeah, whoops, I'm reading my notes incorrectly.
they became the biggest thing on planet Earth.
That's right.
Oddly, out of nowhere.
1973, Dark Side of the Moon, estimated sales of over 45 million.
Mm-hmm. Quadruple diamond.
I'll tell you, as appealing as it was, there was no more doodling in the margins for this band because this record is big.
Yeah, starting here, the records are all kind of these big giant statements. So there's no more kind of like, these are the tunes we got, we're just going to go forward with this. They're all kind of these overarching concept, Leviathan, massive albums. And this is the start of that period.
Yeah, and this is also the beginning of Waters in his stumbling around to find a songwriting identity, realizing that him conflating himself with the sort of street cred built-in madness of Syd Barrett was going to be his ticket. So not only didn't he pick the motherfucker up in January of 1968, then he fucking desiccated his carcass in order to have songwriting grist for the mill, along with his boring-ass dead dad.
I don't think the dad shows up quite yet.
The dad, no, well, not in the.
Not is
the dad in this?
There's a couple albums down the road. I don't think the dad's
Aren't
really
there
around.
lyrics in Us and Them that are militaristic?
Maybe a little bit.
I mean, the fucking, who cares? Just have one song about your dead dad. You can't have several albums worth. Imagine if Clapton just did Tears of Heaven over albums and albums.
It wouldn't his work would not have been a lot different.
Yes. So
He would still be an anti-vaxxer.
Exactly. So this is the most infuriating aspect of this stage of their career is, I think, well, I don't know if it's infuriating. It's more, it's intriguing to me conceptually and has been for a long time that if you compare Madcap Laughs to Dark Side of the Moon, before we get into the specific songs on Dark Side, conceptually, the reality of madness versus somebody who's on the outside looking in, kind of, is able to well articulate madness. It is so unbelievably different. You have those, sudden whiplash, herky-jerky chord changes, tempo changes from Madcap compared to Dark Side is perfectly orchestrated. Every last piece is in place perfectly.
Yeah, to me, the fastidiousness of Dark Side is kind of the magic of it.
I agree.
It is so laser focused and so fussed over. And it has all these little miniature beautiful things on it. It's the first time they worked in 16-track. And it's a pretty different world going from 8-track to 16-track. You're a lot less, especially at that time. Now you have unlimited, amounts of tracks, but it's a whole different way of thinking of things. Going to 16, for all of the epicness of Dark Side of the Moon, it never feels heavy-handed to me. It never feels like they're going over the top. It doesn't feel like it's like preachy or like some of the later albums.
And then unlike
the themes don't smash you in the face, really.
Right. So you look at, for example, Joe. You look at The Wall. Okay, you have songs that the band are practically not on. You just have Bob Ezrin masturbating onto analog tape.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily in a bad way, but that is really what he's doing, and not even metaphorically, probably. With this, you have all these effects and things that are layered in, but they serve the music.
It's evocative rather than something that pummels you over the head with its message. And there's also there's a sense of dynamics on this album where the quiet parts are very quiet, and then the loud parts really explode.
Like when the clocks kick in on time.
Yeah, or all the big high singing on "Great Gig in the Sky" and all that. Like when
and the way it crests on Eclipse.
The dynamics of it, the low parts, it's patient. It sets up, and the payoffs are really immense.
I love every song on the record. There's honestly not a moment I don't love. Part of me is relieved I feel that way because I feel when I love a record like this, like I'm a normal person.
Right.
This is what normal people listen to.
Yeah, sure. A lot of these songs have kind of made it as, like we were talking before, classic rock radio staples. Most of the record, really, right? Like Breathe, Time, Money, Us and Them.
Mostly Money.
Brain
Damage, pretty much every song. Song.
These don't feel tired to me when I hear them still.
No, it always sounds good.
It always sounds like I'm happy to hear these tunes.
And it's one of the ultimate headphone records because I even remember I had been listening to it for many years. And in college in 1990, with my and our buddy Giles Dickerson, we heard a voice we'd never heard before in Great Gig in the Sky. I Never Said I Was Afraid of Dying. Mm-hmm. I'd never heard that before. Mm-hmm. That blew our minds one stoned evening. But definitely 5 stars. There's no question this is a 5-star.
This is an easy 5 stars. There are other things that we haven't even gotten into. Like this is the last time where I feel like they really played together really great as a band.
Agreed.
The chemistry and the interplay of them and how they're the sense of they're all kind of creating a bigger piece of a puzzle. Just the telepathy.
It's also
between
the last
them.
time they sound like a band.
Yeah, I agreed. I think that's kind of part of the same thing.
Yeah.
Also wanted to mention before we move on, I love the way they used the EMS synthesizer, the great synthesizer stuff on the Run and. Any color you like, really beautiful. The synthesizer they used a couple different ones, but they're made by the EMS company, and that was the synth that you'll see Brian Eno playing in early Roxy music. It looks kind of like a briefcase. If you're interested in synthesizers at all, do a YouTube search for the EMS. There's one called the Synthy. That was the one that was used on the Run, and then there's another one's the Putney synth. I've gone into like hours-long YouTube rabbit holes just watching EMS synth videos. Really cool stuff.
Nerd.
Yeah.
Moving on. Wish You Were Here, 1975. This is Rick Wright and David Gilmour's favorite Floyd LP. It's both a music industry critique and a Syd Barrett memorial.
Now, for starters, songs that are about the music industry or critiques of the music industry, I mean, they don't need to exist. There's nothing more boring than hearing about how the music
That's why
industry...
I was always mystified that Lola was such a big album for the Kinks. Although the title track is the only outlier on the record. Every other song is a whiny song about Ray Davies getting ripped off.
8 Man is kind of like kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a sore subject for me. It's like when songs about how the music industry is corrupt or whatever, it's, that's... Who fucking cares?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is actually apparently the last time they all saw Syd. Syd dropped by the sessions, which is odd because the album is about him. And by all accounts, he was completely unrecognizable. And his hair was shaved, his eyebrows were shaved, he was fat.
They thought he was an engineer.
Yeah, he just apparently was mistaken for an engineer before he was recognized. And he played a mix of Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Apparently did not even draw a connection that the song was even about him. Mm-hmm. But
He thought it was about Neil Diamond.
Exactly. I used to love this record. For many years, I think I've been feeling that this is a very cold, uninviting record. Don't enjoy listening to it. There's, and also half the record to me is just as disposable as Adam Hart Mother, because the second part of Shine On You Crazy Diamond is superfluous, and Welcome to the Machine is a pile of shit as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so that's a pretty, I think, legit criticism of this, is that a good chunk of it is not really listenable. So there's kind of two different kinds of things in this. There's the radio staples. There's the main section of Shine On You Crazy Diamond. There's what's the other? The title track and Have a Cigar. Those are kind of the
sung by Roy Harper.
Right. Those are kind of the essential parts of the record, and that's maybe like 60% of the record in terms of running time. And then the rest of it is I don't like Welcome to the Machine. That is kind of foreshadowing for where they went. They have a lot of these like E minor to C kind of songs that are like plodding, not very harmonically satisfying.
It's just a slog. It's a slog.
Sloggy kind of songs.
And then the second Shine On segment sounds like the shitty end of the stick of Weather Report, which to me is a distastefully shitty genre.
Yeah. So they've kind of settled into a thing here. I think all the stuff, this one is, I've talked a lot about these songs being on classic rock radio and that taking the shine off of some of them. The songs in this are really in that category for me. They don't have this sort of special fairy dust magic that the Dark Side tracks have. These are ones, when I hear these, I'm like, I feel kind of instantly bored, even by the ones that I know are very good. Like Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I mean, it's compositionally a really good song. The playing's good. It's just too many times I feel like I've gone there with it to really kind of enjoy it much anymore. But if you're somehow are not familiar with the work of Pink Floyd, you'll want to check.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, this is not a popular opinion, but Trump was voted president, so I mean, you can expect whatever you can from people. Although this is one of the first 3 CDs that I ever bought. When I look back on this album, it's always with distaste and scorn. I think of the vocals on Welcome to the Machine and just a sort of cold, mechanized feel to it. It feels embalmed and devoid of emotion. And I got to say, for an album that considers itself so empathetically in tune with its muses, it doesn't seem to have a beating heart at its center whatsoever.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, like the title track, right? That one, that's a pretty sincere, pretty good song.
It is. And
that's the one that I think most succeeds in kind of making an emotional connection.
And the first Shine On, I think.
Yeah. But I think, it's
a mixed bag. I give it 3.5 stars.
I gave it 4 because I feel like the strong moments are kind of essential enough, even though they're not.
I agree.
Even though they're not personally things that I would put on maybe to listen to a lot. It's not. You can't really hold it against it that those songs are so popular.
Listen, I love Pink Floyd, but the popular opinion is that they own the 70s. What I feel to be true is that they hit on this insane lottery with Dark Side and then rode that idea until the wheels totally came off.
Yeah.
And didn't really sort of perfect the concept again of doing this enclosed thematic thing until The Wall.
Right.
That's what I think.
That seems about right.
So moving on, in 1977, Animals.
And so before we get too much into Animals, the other thing that's happening now is that they have become really huge. And for a band that of this magnet, it's almost a little weird that a band that's this idiosyncratic. Let's go back in time. They had just done the Wish You Were Here tour. We're not thinking about whatever comes next. They're monstrously massive. They're playing football stadiums. Mm-hmm. And the music they make is not really like party music. I mean, they're these kind of long, exploratory. It's just such a different culture.
Yeah, but during that time, it wasn't necessarily just cracking Budweisers.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting to.
It was like cough syrup.
Yeah, these people are on heavy amounts of drugs.
Strychnine.
So it's football stadiums full of people who are insanely fucked up.
Like people like Tangerine Dream was a big draw during that time. Lester Bangs wrote that really indelible review of the Tangerine Dream show, and it's the entire crowd swaying on its feet, high on cough syrup.
Yeah, so you kind of have to take that into account. Right, that's a thing that seems to really not be it's just such a. I mean, it's almost 50 years ago or whatever now. It's such a different time in the culture that a band this idiosyncratic, with this kind of like, this doesn't seem like this is music that would be filling football stadiums, but it was though.
Yeah, and this is also, when I think of laser light shows, it's basically this shit.
I had that in my notes. It's funny that you say that. Maybe some of this sounds better if you're watching a laser light show.
It always does. Anything sounds better with lasers or sharks or tapes.
Yeah. So Animals, I'll let you...
Animals, 1977. If you want a full rundown of how I feel about this, I used to write a column called On Second Thought for the International Review of Music. You can do a search. But I hate this album. I hate it. This is them trying to marry. It's basically punk Floyd, but it's also proggy, and it's filled with vile vitriol, and to me, just very hard to stomach, because it's Roger Waters. Just if you like the sound of somebody whining interminably for 40 minutes, then.
Yeah. Well, they're in a new phase with this here, and this is really kind of they never really did anything quite like this again, but they gave up on any kind of like poetry or any kind of like lyric clever, or not even clever is not even the right word. Any kind of the lyrics are very condescending, very patronizing,
extremely misanthropic.
You're either a pig, a dog, or a sheep in the half-baked worldview of this album. There doesn't seem to be a lot of sympathy or...
and they're just struggling for a concept. I mean, let's do Animal Farm, but we'll just call it Animals.
Yeah.
It's talk about it. I mean, now they're reaching. As far as I'm concerned, they wrote it to the wheels fall off. People love Animals.
Now, I think, again, I'm kind of speculating here, but they had been playing the football stadium gigs, and they had reached this monstrous level of success. So it seems like when they're making this album, they're trying to do stuff that they think is going to translate in that setting. So it starts to feel like arena rock. It actually does start to sound like football stadium music, where the kind of more introspective stuff of the last few albums didn't really make it starts veering into the bombastic in a way that would carry through the rest of the Roger Waters era.
This, as far as I'm concerned, this is the worst Pink Floyd record, including their later stuff when they weren't even technically Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. It's not good. It's not good, Dave.
Yeah, it's definitely not good.
This album's not good, Dave.
Anyone who thinks this album is good is a complete piece of shit. I give it 1 star.
I gave this 2.5. I don't think they've fallen off quite down to 1 star level. There's a few things on it that are kind of all right.
Only Pigs on the Wing, and that accounts for 2 minutes of the record.
Dogs is the best part of the record.
I hate Dogs.
So that's kind of the one that made it onto the radio.
That fucking song is 18 minutes long.
But there's kind of a core of it that's kind of decent. Again, don't make me defend. I gave it 2.5.
Okay.
I got to say something also about the sounds, the sonics of it. It seems to have declined. Where, say what you want about "Wish You Were Here," it's very pristine sounding. It has that very clean, clear, crystal clear kind of as a bell kind of sound. Animal sounds kind of murky.
I think the whole idea, though, was to try to have an immediacy like the punk movement. They saw, basically, I think Waters became prescient about becoming a dinosaur and trying to merge into that lane, but keeping the long songs so he can keep his sense of identity, trying to have his cake and eat it too. And to me, it doesn't work.
Well, they missed the point entirely of what it was supposed to mean, right? The punk movement, like it's supposed to be about sort of taking, like it's about like, getting it back to the people, getting back to roots. And so it's this like half-baked concept album with these long songs that's based on Animal Farm and, these extended jam sections and the guitar solos. I don't know how you could miss the mark anymore.
I literally definitely never want to hear anything from this album ever again in my life. Seriously. Life is too short. I've had health issues, and coming out the other side, the one realization I had was I'm done with Animals.
Yeah. All right.
Moving on to The Wall. The unassailable double album classic, over 30 million sold. When I was 12 years old, it was my favorite album of all time, but I'm not 12 anymore, and neither are you, Joe. How do you feel about this record?
Well, I never had really the initial love and obsession with it. I never really went through a phase where this was my favorite album. In fact, I always I think I maybe enjoy it more now than I did I can appreciate it more. I feel like.
I mean, there's truly great songs. I mean, you have Comfortably Numb, you have Run Like Hell, you have The Thin Ice, In the Flesh, Goodbye Blue Sky. There's
You could
great
definitely
songs.
shrink this down to one record.
You could, but then it wouldn't truly be The Wall. I mean, it's so
so-
would you say the most bombastic rock record of all time?
Yeah, it picks up. The trend kind of started with Animals, and they just kind of lean more into it. The difference is on Animals there's really no A material. It's kind of just they kind of try to find a sound, and there's on the Wall there's a lot of A material, a lot of songs that stand up over time.
The wheels fall off toward the end, admittedly, but the first side, the way it's launched out of the cannon like that with the first bunch of songs, it's very propulsive.
The songs that are kind of the narrative songs on the record that are advancing the sort of boring storyline are the ones that lose me, and the more universal kind of songs are the ones that have kind of survived on as relevant.
Yeah, I mean, no one puts The Wall on and skips to Waiting for the Worms.
Right, yeah. There's a couple Goodbye Blue Sky. I like that one a lot. You don't really hear that one. That's not kind of as overdone. Young Lust kind of is back to this sort of there are kind of hints back to some of the more rocking stuff on the early soundtracky albums.
One of the things I love most about Comfortably Numb, just historically from the perspective of being a fan of the band, is that that's really the last gasp of the creative relationship of Waters and Gilmour.
Yeah, that's the last time you really hear. Well, yeah, because the next record is really just the last one with Waters.
It's a Waters wank-off session.
Yeah, so this is the last time they really are working together in any capacity.
Any capacity, yeah.
We probably should talk a little bit about Bob Ezrin. So he's pretty essential, I think, to The Wall. I think Bob Ezrin, for those of you who don't know, is a
master of the concept album.
Yeah, he's a producer who leans towards the bombastic and leans towards
but does it so well. So in I think it's 1972 when he produced Lou Reed's Berlin. Do you know the story about the song The Kids?
Yeah,
he made his own kids cry because he needed crying kids for Berlin's my favorite record he's ever produced. Yeah. It's the best.
The Berlin and The Wall are kind of the two definitive examples of his Ezrin-ness, where he really all of the.
But the Elder was him as well, wasn't it? Kisses the Elder.
Yeah, that one
the
doesn't
Lou
have
Reed
that's
Kiss collab.
Yeah. Oh, that's so bad.
Not good. As intriguing as it sounds.
No. He also did, I think, Destroyer, which is their big, massive hit.
Yes, yeah.
That's kind of just pretty conventional, just big rock record.
It's excellent, yeah. It's like it has like a Jack Douglas sound, Aerosmith and First Cheap Trick record.
The Wall really leans into the sort of sound effect, audio verite, like the cinematic Ezrin thing that he's known for.
Including The Trial, which I believe is over 5 minutes long, and it's I don't even know if anyone in the band is on that song.
Yeah,
it's pure bombastic orchestration and sound effects.
But I think his stuff on The Wall does add a lot to it. Even if it sort of can border on the silly at times, he's sort of right on that edge to me, Bob Ezrin, where I think his things are so distinctive, but it's almost sometimes on the verge of like it being kind of ridiculous. But I think it does add a lot to The Wall.
And although it appeals more to the immature than the mature, I would say I'd have to say objectively it's a masterpiece, but it grates as well. So for that reason, I give it 4 stars out of 5.
I give it 3.5.
Huh.
The other thing that we haven't really talked about with The Wall is there are several Roger Waters shouty songs where he's singing in his sort of shouty voice. Those are instant fail.
What are some of those?
I don't even know. I didn't have it listed here, but you know the ones I'm talking about. Where he's just like,
yeah.
And he does that a lot on the Final Cut too. Then they
There's
tend,
some
they
other
tend,
affectations
they tend to be the ones that are kind of like
and like empty spaces. When you think of songs like empty spaces,
the narrative driving kind of songs
Exactly.
that are kind of telling the story. Which we haven't really talked about that either. He's where he spits on the fan and like
right. So this actually originated during the Animals tour. He's a misanthropic piece of shit. So he looked down at a teenage fan that was trying to clamber up and overtake, not even overtake security, just was whatever.
I think
just
he was
saw
climbing
him
a
as
big fence or something. That was
yeah,
along the
yeah.
side of
So
the stage.
Roger Waters spit at him, and he didn't. I don't even think the story is that he was retributive or contrite in any way, shape, or form.
I think it is kind of. I think to me,
I think he was more clinical about, how does a person go from this to this? I don't think he was thinking like, how did I fall this far? A normal person would.
well, yeah, if you think about it that way, right? It's kind of a rationalization, right? Well, of
Yeah.
course I spit on the kid. This is all the things that happened to me. My dad died, and
to him, look, to you and I,
that's the uncharitable way.
if you or I spit on a kid, we would feel awful for a long time. He saw it as grist for the mill for a double concept album.
The whole album is kind of a rationalization of why it happened.
Yeah,
that's what happened to anybody. Anybody would spit on the kid.
Right, because
if you were subjected to being this rich and famous.
Because my dumb fucking dad died, and Sid Barrett, was the cloud that reigned over me for my entire career, and I based all my songwriting around this guy that went insane.
And then it turned out I had widespread adoration from millions of people. It was terrible. What would you do?
So
that's the uncharitable way to look at it. The more charitable way to look at it is that he is like sort of offering that he's acknowledging the terribleness of that incident and attempting to come to terms with it.
I don't think so.
You can be the judge of discography.
He just
nation.
hates. You look at his face, and he looks like he's seething mad all the time. The fuck does he have to be mad about?
Yeah, he always kind of did, I guess.
That fucking scowl, dude. Yeah, I mean, you think I bought anything from him after? Yeah, I did buy Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking because at that point nobody knew. Mm-hmm. Okay, but then Radio Chaos, it was like, okay, see you later, dude. Yeah. I never listened to a single Roger Waters album after that.
Yeah, I have not delved into his solo career either.
Who cares?
I think you really need all the elements of Pink Floyd to be working.
Absolutely.
For it to put the right frame around his stuff.
But
that's already breaking down a bit at the wall.
But then the final cut is a whole other level. So that's 4 years later, 1983. It's basically an amalgam of a bunch of wall outtakes mixed with 1982 recordings. Rick Wright is not on the record. It is the last album that Roger Waters was on, and Nick Mason primarily provides only sound effects.
Right. And there is even more of this sort of shouty Roger Waters singing on this, and of the kind of boring narrative songs that are a lot more.
It is so boring.
Yeah, it's the
whole record is so boring.
There's not really a highlight. There's not really anything to recommend it.
Nothing. Any self-respecting playlist would omit this entirely as a blight. Sort of like Velvet Underground Squeeze.
It seems like very far below even Animals.
Have you heard Velvet Underground Squeeze?
I think I flipped through it on YouTube. Or
you got to hear the whole thing. Yeah. Something like that exists is just amazing. Mm-hmm. And my favorite thing about Mojo Magazine, by the way, is that they would examine such a micro time period as just VU during Squeeze. Mm-hmm. I mean, that gives a nerd a boner, bro. Anyway, so the final cut is an anti-war concept album about his dad primarily, who died when that piece of shit was 4 months old. And he's still struggling with it. He was struggling with this going back to Corporal Clegg. Mm-hmm. He's just riding his dad's dead carcass along with Sid Barrett.
Well, the conceit of the album is that that England's invasion of the Falkland Islands was like a betrayal of the things that his dad died for. Which, okay, maybe, but,
nothing screams rock and roll and arena rock as the Falklands.
Like a border dispute of disputed territories in the,
It should barely be considered either a Roger Waters album or a Pink Floyd record. I give this 1 star.
I also give this 1 star, and I advise you to skip it.
I don't even know why I give it 1 star, frankly, but I do, I
I'm
guess.
still looking for that special flower.
You know what? I give it a half star. I give it a half star.
All right.
Based on my doubt of the 1-star review. All right, so moving right along, that was basically the dissolution of the band. Following that, you have a couple live albums and 3 albums that we're going to talk about mainly. Okay, so the first one, this is, post Roger Waters' exit in 1987, they shat out Momentary Lapse of Reason.
Which you've probably heard a couple of these songs at the dentist or something.
Yeah, it's really dated. It's basically a David Gilmour solo record. Doesn't really sound like Pink Floyd. Tries to sound of its era.
It's like the David Gilmour who played on No More Lonely Nights by Paul McCartney.
Which is a great song, but that was an odd proggy guitar solo for such a straightforward pop song, wasn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like Momentary Lapse.
Right. Yeah, that there's nothing really to recommend it. I give it 1.5 stars.
I gave it 1. I could probably be persuaded to do 1.5. There was a couple of hit singles on it again that you probably would recognize. It was really huge at the time. It was I think it went like multi-platinum.
I think mainly because people wanted to get to know the record before they saw the live act.
Yeah. Also, look, let's be honest. They're in a blatant just cash grab phase because it's not even really a Pink Floyd. They had wrested control of the name, I guess, from Roger Waters. And
there was a drawn-out court battle that made the whole thing seem ugly anyway.
Yeah, and it's hardly any of the other members are on it. It's really just a David Gilmour record. Putting the Pink Floyd name on it was just a pure cash grab. I don't think there's any other way to look at it.
There's it
would have been more ethically honest to go tour, for him to put a solo record and tour it that way.
Right, or just call it Stink Floyd.
Yeah. That's basically a really good idea. Could you imagine? That'd be awesome.
It would.
Stink Floyd, a Momentary Lapse of Reason. That changes the whole.
It does.
So much better.
It really would be. The main way to differentiate, in case you can't, between 1987's Momentary Lapse of Reason and 1994's Division Bell is the former is the shitty album that doesn't sound like Pink Floyd, and the latter is the shitty album that actually sounds like Pink Floyd.
Right. Yeah. So they kind of go for some of the Floyd-y kind of tropes. Even like they do the E minor to C chord change again. They do that. They're kind of signifying that it's very Pink Floyd-y. It sounds like. The songs on the Division Bell sound like the songs where you're at the Pink Floyd concert and you leave to go buy a $20 beer during that song. And then when you come back, you hope they're playing like Wish You Were Here or something. Sounds like the songs you don't really want to hear them play at the arena show, but they do anyway. And
I give Momentary Lapse of Reason 1.5 stars.
No, this is the Division. Oh, okay.
And the Division Bell 2 stars.
I'm gonna give the Division Bell 1 star too. And I give them both 1 stars based on the premise that I would never want to willingly listen to them for any reason at all. I sat through them though.
Yeah, I mean, when you hit those records, when you're doing a trawl, it's basically the diarrhea dribble at the conclusion of an endless shit.
It wasn't easy getting through them. I gotta say.
Yeah. So the only other album to talk about, and it is worth mentioning, is 2014's The Endless River, which promises to be the final Pink Floyd record.
Although I guess Richard Wright is no longer with us. 3 of the 4 are still around.
But he's on the record, and it comprises instrumental and ambient music based on material recorded during sessions for the group's previous album, The Division Bell. Additional material was recorded in 2013 and 2014 on Gilmour's boat or some shit. And in the studio or some shit. Only one of the tracks has lead vocals, and that's the song Louder Than Words, written by Gilmour's right arm, his wife.
This one, it's not really that interesting.
No.
It's
not.
It sounds exactly like what it is, which is here are some songs that maybe could make this Division Bell album. I guess these are all kind of Rick Wright written ones. It was made a lot in the 90s, and then I guess a little bit later, a time when not really known for great like synth keyboard sounds. It's all sort of very like digital, very dated sounding. It's not really bursting with amazing creative ideas. It sounds like, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like somebody made like Pink Floyd library music. It sounds like somebody was like, I need something for this TV show that sounds like Pink Floyd.
I need a Pink Floyd cue.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
And I need a really long one so I could just take parts of it.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, that's the conclusion. I give it 1.5 stars.
I gave it 1. Sure, 1.5. Okay. All right.
I'm glad we could exit this trawl as friends.
I think I got very tired at the end. The last 3 albums were pretty dire to get through them all. The last 4.
The band, yeah, it's true. The last 4, the band, which was once so endlessly listenable, became just such a grueling wheezing. It was like watching a giant behemoth like slowly die.
Yeah. And you don't get the feeling that if Roger Waters had stuck around and they kept making music together, that it would have been really any better. I think it takes a special kind of... It's pretty rare that anybody who reaches that like dinosaur status of playing football stadiums can maintain it being creatively interesting. It's really not really... I mean, Dylan kind of... He's not really a football stadium guy, but... Someone who's like a big titan like that, who can continue making interesting music into the 80s, 90s, from the 60s. There's not really very many.
Listen, I know it's either an unpopular opinion or people would say, well, of course, you're a nerd. You like the early stuff. But let me make a case for Syd Barrett owning this band. Number one, he was only around for 10 months, but it seems like years because of what he produced. Number two, he haunted the band. I mean, the band just used the idea of Syd Barrett to mainly take its entire creative path forward. Once they decided on a direction, all they did was look back at Syd. And they threw in Roger's dad for good measure and called it a day.
Well, there's kind of the first phase with Syd, and then there's the transitional phase where they're figuring out what they're doing. Some of it is like inspired by Syd. So like Rick Wright's trying to write kind of Syd-like songs. And then they move into where they mature a little bit, and then they start using Syd as subject matter.
Right.
And then when they run out of that, it's like they turn to this kind of political
like a war
sort of thing, and it's
and then they battle each other in court.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is just they used Syd.
Yeah.
They desiccated him like a fucking chicken.
Well. Yeah, I guess I don't really have a problem with it per se.
I mean, it's exploitative no matter how you look at it, because this is a guy who wanted to pretend like that whole time in his life didn't happen.
Right.
He tried to erase himself from society because he didn't want that part of his life to be part of his life from then forward.
Yeah.
And they refused to let him go.
Yeah. I think it's more like, I guess you could see it that way. They made some great art out of it.
They did.
So that whenever you're making great art, I think you're kind of like giving something to the world. So that doesn't come across as exploitative to me. But there's definitely like, when they had to find out what to do next, it gets a lot less interesting. Like, I mean, like the subject matter of The Wall, to me, the story of it, I almost like wish it didn't have that story. I would like the songs better as
different story. Story's fine,
but even just as standalone songs, I like a lot of the songs on it. The stuff that's more connected to the story, it doesn't really reach me as much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an interesting history. It's an oft misunderstood history in America.
And a lot of their best stuff is really underappreciated and not really very well known, and would be, I think, surprising to a lot of people who haven't done the deep dive into it. There's a lot of quality in there that's kind of buried.
I'm going to tell you right now the 3 best Pink Floyd albums that have ever been created. We're going to start with number 3. Number 3 is Metal. Number 2 is Dark Side of the Moon. And number 1 is The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. You may disagree, but you would just be wrong.
Solid.
And then the worst album is definitely Animals, and that one goes out to my buddy Joe Cravino, who it hurts him very, very much that I feel that way.
Okay, so my list is similar but a little different. I also have Metal at number 3. I have Piper at the Gates of Dawn at number 2, and Dark Side of the Moon at number 1. That's a pretty normie list I have there.
Yeah, I'd say that's a solid list.
Worst album, I'm going to give to. I'm not really counting the 80s ones without Roger Waters. Those are worse than any of the worst main canonical albums. I guess they're all canonical, but I'm going to go with The Final Cut as my least favorite. That Animals is better than The Final Cut, I must say.
To me, it grates more, so I just hate it more. The Final Cut is like hating having diarrhea. It's uncomfortable for a little bit.
That's a ringing endorsement. All right, so back to business.
But yeah, here's the thing. From 1967 to 1973, they were one of the best bands that ever walked the earth. And then that stopped for me.
Yeah, sure.
It's not the popular opinion, but it's the right opinion.
Right. It's what we aim to do here.
That's right.
We aim to make you mad.
Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you appreciated what we had to say. Maybe it angered you. Maybe it inspired you. Definitely check out the playlist on our website, discography.com.
And feel free to leave us angry comments and tell us that you think we're wrong. You'll be wrong.
You will be wrong, but we would love to hear from you. And for the love of all that's sacred, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And be sure to subscribe to us on your podcast platform of your choice. We will be here every Monday from now till the end of time.
I know this is only our first couple episodes, but we can assure you that we will be punctual with new content every Monday. You'll see. We'll prove to you.
All right. We will see you all soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.